I want to turn now. I'm joined by attorney Deborah Blum, who joins me on set with more. Deborah, I want to get into some of these documents, the thousands of pages. Thank you, first off, for joining us. The thousands of pages that were released on Friday. How do they pertain to Epstein's case, and what were really the big things that came out of this?
Well, my understanding of it is that those pertain to a civil case from years ago, maybe 2007, a defamation suit. So those potentially could be used in future civil lawsuits. I do believe that he has other lawsuits pending against him currently, and his estate will be substituted in those, unlike the criminal lawsuit that has to be dismissed due to his death.
We know there were so many victims who were looking forward to seeing him face his day in court and to face a trial. That won't happen in this case. But what will happen to the other people around him who may have helped facilitate this?
Well, there's no bar to the federal government going forward against those individuals. I actually think that there should have been legal impediments to the case against Epstein in federal court due to his plea deal, especially pertaining to the Florida acts that he was indicted under in New York court. I do think that they will be able to go forward against the other possible defendants, the targets or subjects of investigation, and for them, they won't be able to contest certain items that were discovered in his apartment.
And, you know, in addition to this, we know that the women, the ring that he was allegedly linked with, you know, this, many people have accused him of this sort of global prostitution ring, potentially of being involved in with these underage women. How do you explain to people how this was allowed to go on for so long?
You know, I don't think that there's any answer to that question. I think that we can focus on things that we have answers to or should have answers to, such as how was he able to commit suicide while he was technically under suicide watch by the Bureau of Prisons, even if he wasn't under suicide watch. I mean, I've been inside these jails hundreds of times, and the conditions really are deplorable, and they don't take proper steps to watch out for the inmates. Oftentimes, they don't have access to food, they don't have access to necessary medicine. And I understand that this man was charged with heinous acts, but we have to think of how these are human lives and how the Bureau of Prisons should be held responsible. And in the future, something like this should be prevented.
Does the Department of Justice get involved? Should there be an inspector general who comes in to find out exactly how this happened?
Everybody knows about the conditions in these prisons. Unless you're in a federal camp, the conditions really are terrible. And I can understand why somebody maybe would consider taking their lives. Obviously here, it's a lot more complicated, a lot more layers. And, you know, so many high-profile individuals could be impacted by this. And despite his death, they still will be impacted. And they're going to have less standing to contest any of the search warrants that were executed as a result of this case against Epstein.
Tell me a little bit more about search warrants. Now that he's dead, how is that handled at this point?
Well, he would have had standing to say that it was an illegal search and seizure and that they shouldn't have been executed, but these other individuals lack the standing, and it could come in against them at their trials. We know that many people have been named that were on his private jet, and, you know, his handler, the woman that was the fixer, she might be charged because, as you said before, people are going to want to see someone be held responsible for what went on.
So just to be clear, now that he's dead, at this hour, if police wanted to go in and search any of his properties, they have the right to do that right now?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
You know, at this point, the federal prosecution against him has to come to a hard stop. Usually, if you were in the position of representing somebody that was deceased, you'd have to give to the judge and to the prosecutor a death
Still
certificate.
have to go through the procedures
right.
here.
Yes,
Yeah.
But here, everybody knows a statement was issued either by the Bureau of Prisons or the Department of Justice that he is deceased. So the prosecution against him stops. And also, they won't be able to seize his property because it was named in the indictment that the U.S. government wanted to take his Manhattan penthouse, but now that there's been no hearing, they're not going to be able to do so.
Okay, so that doesn't happen then
Correct.
At this point. You know, in addition to this, we know the judge had previously denied Epstein's bail request because of fears that he was a danger to the public. What went into that decision to keep him?
Well, in a sex crime, and the defendant actually has a burden to prove that they're not going to be a flight risk, and because of the fact of his Lolita Express, the government and the judge were able to hang their hat on that and say you are a flight risk. We know that they found a passport in his safe that was from years ago, maybe 30 years ago, that gave him a fake identity. So I can understand why the government and the judge were able to say, no, in this specific case where the defendant has a burden to show that they should be released, unlike in other cases where the presumption in a federal case would be that they should be released or a bail package should be worked out. Here there was a higher standard being worked in and held against Epstein. Although the federal case law does say that he could have had private guards stand by him 24/7, I mean, ultimately I don't think that he would have been a true flight risk and that he would have reoffended.
Okay. Deborah Blum, thank you very much for joining us.